As the protagonist crouched behind the reception desk, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The two zombies, locked in a primal standoff, began to growl aggressively at one another. Suddenly, the zombie wielding a brick with its decaying features twisted in rage, hurled the brick with surprising force toward its opponent. The zombie with the boxing gloves, surprisingly agile despite its undead state, sidestepped the projectile just in time. No sooner had the brick clattered harmlessly to the floor than it charged, fists flying in a flurry of punches, 8 in total, each connecting with bone-crunching thuds. Some blows landed on the brick-wielding zombie's torso, while others smashed into its rotting face, leaving behind splatters of putrid fluids. In a bizarre twist as the dust settled, the boxing gloves on the attacking zombie vanished into thin air, perhaps a side effect of the intense combat. Seizing the moment, the boxing glove zombie lunged forward and clamped its decaying hands around the face of the zombie with the brick, its fingers clawing and attempting to gouge out its soulless eyes. But the brick-wielding zombie was not to be outdone. With a swift and eerie motion, it teleported the brick back into its grasp from the floor. With a vicious swing, it brought the brick crashing into the face of the boxing-gloved zombie, the impact echoing through the lobby like a death knell, sending the attacker reeling back. The struggle between these two grotesque fighters intensified, each using their limited but dangerous resources in a desperate fight for dominance. As the frantic fight escalated into a nightmarish spectacle, it became brutally apparent that the zombie with the boxing gloves was hopelessly outmatched by the ferocity of its brick-wielding opponent. This relentless creature, a master of dodging and counter-striking, danced around the flailing punch with chilling agility. Each time a gloved fist grazed its rotting form, the brick served as an impenetrable barrier, absorbing the blows while the zombie prepared to unleash its own ferocious retaliation. With merciless intent, the brick-wielding zombie struck back with bone-shattering precision. Each blow to the boxing-gloved zombie's face resonated like a gunshot through the lobby, echoing the violent symphony of their brutal clash. The once fighting spirit of the boxing-gloved zombie began to wither under the onslaught, each punch extracting a piece of its will to fight. Fear seeped into its movements, slowing them down as desperation clawed at its mind. It attempted to flee, but every effort was met with ruthless aggression. The brick-wielding zombie, growing impatient with the display of cowardice, seized its opportunity and hurled the boxing-gloved zombie across the room like a ragdoll, its head crashing into the floor with a sickening, wet thud that reverberated ominously. From his hiding place behind the reception desk, the protagonist felt his stomach churn, paralyzed by a visceral dread. He could do nothing but bear witness to the unrelenting brutality as the victorious zombie toyed with its prey, mercilessly smashing the brick against the boxing-gloved zombie's skull. Each strike sent shards of bone flying, mingling with the grotesque splatter of blood and viscera that painted the once innocent lobby in a gruesome tableau of carnage. The agonized screams of the boxing-gloved zombie echoed through the air, a cacophony of suffering that quickly faded into an eerie silence as its body lay still, torn apart and rendered lifeless by the savage onslaught. In an act of grotesque triumph, the brick-wielding zombie plunged its clammy hand into the remains of its defeated foe, ripping out a pulsating green crystal that glimmered with otherworldly energy. With primal hunger, it sank its teeth into the crystal, devouring it with an insatiable ferocity. Each bite sent shockwaves of power coursing through its decaying body, revitalizing it in a twisted resurrection. As the last remnants of the crystal vanished, another brick materialized in its other hand, transforming it into a horrifying, dual-wielding monstrosity, ready to unleash further devastation. The lobby, once a mere backdrop, had morphed into a brutal battleground of survival, and the protagonist zombie prowled the lobby, its heightened senses kicked into overdrive, picking up the faint scent of the protagonist hidden behind the reception desk. Though it couldn't pinpoint his exact location, the instinctual drive to hunt surged within it. In a frantic effort to flush out the hidden survivor, the zombie began launching bricks indiscriminately around the room. the sound of shattering glass and clattering debris echoing ominously in the stillness. The protagonist, frozen in fear, held his breath, desperately stifling any noise that might betray him. He clutched his stomach, willing it to remain silent even as it churned with anxiety. The cacophony of bricks crashing against furniture and walls filled the air, yet he remained resolute, knowing that even the slightest sound could seal his fate. With each step, the brick zombie drew closer, its presence looming larger as it approached the desk. Just as the protagonist felt the weight of despair pressing down on him, the zombie abruptly stopped, its instincts kicking in again. Something more dangerous was on the horizon, something that compelled it to flee. In a panic, the brick zombie turned and bolted from the room, its undead legs carrying it away at a desperate pace, leaving behind an unsettling silence. After a few agonizing moments, the protagonist strained to hear anything but the echo of his own rapid heartbeat. The absence of noise was deafening, and when he cautiously peeked out from behind the desk, he was met with a gruesome sight. The bodies of the undead strewn across the lobby, remnants of the savage battle that had just unfolded, but the brick zombie was nowhere in sight. Taking a shaky breath, he stepped out from his hiding place, his instincts screaming at him to run. Each step felt like a gamble, a fragile dance on the edge of survival. Just 4 steps into his tentative exploration, a chilling voice pierced the air, a little girl's voice, sweet yet filled with an unsettling innocence. "I found you, mister." His heart dropped, a cold sweat breaking out as he slowly turned around. Standing before him was a little girl in a bright yellow coat, her hair framing a cherubic face that seemed both innocent and haunting in the dim light of the lobby. The coat was bright against the backdrop of the devastation, a stark contrast that made her appear almost out of place in this nightmare. But the familiarity of her voice sent a shiver down his spine. The very same girl who had once transformed into a monstrous creature that had forced him to flee for his life. The image of her sweet smile twisted into something grotesque flooded his mind, and now somehow she was here, her presence thickening the air with an aura of dread. How could she be here, he thought, panic surging through him. He had just emerged from the chaos, certain he was alone, yet the little girl stood there, an unsettling figure in her yellow coat, as if she were a twisted beacon of innocence among the horrors surrounding them. What game is she playing, he wondered, feeling paralyzed by fear, caught in the web of his worst nightmares. The lobby, once a chaotic battleground, now felt like a trap, and he was ensnared, teetering on the brink of a nightmare that threatened to consume him whole. The little girl in the yellow coat smiled, her eyes glinting with a strange light, and he knew that whatever horror awaited him next would be unlike anything he had ever faced before. The little girl in the bright yellow coat stood before him, her expression both innocent and unsettling against the backdrop of the lobby's carnage. Her coat, vibrant and out of place in the midst of the blood and destruction, seemed to glow with an eerie light, illuminating her delicate features while casting shadows that danced ominously around her. There was an unsettling juxtaposition in her appearance. While her smile radiated a childlike purity, her presence was steeped in the darkness of the world that surrounded them. "Why are you hiding, mister?" she asked, her voice lilting and cheerful, almost sing-song, yet layered with a chilling undertone that sent shivers racing down the protagonist's spine. The tone was disarming, and he felt as if she was toying with him, aware of the fear that coursed through his veins. Her eyes, wide and innocent, held a depth that hinted at knowledge far beyond her years, as if she understood the horrors of this world in ways he could not fathom. He stood frozen, caught in a moment that felt suspended in time, the echoes of chaos still reverberating in his ears. "What do you want?" he managed to croak out, his voice trembling as he struggled to maintain his composure. The little girl tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing through him. "I just wanted to play," she replied, her smile growing wider, revealing teeth that appeared unnaturally sharp against her soft features. "You're so good at hiding, but I found you. Isn't that fun?" The protagonist's heart raced, dread pooling in his stomach. The memories of her transformation into a horrifying creature invaded his thoughts, how she had morphed from a sweet child into a monstrous entity that had hunted him with relentless ferocity. That memory was a visceral reminder of how quickly innocence could turn to terror, and he felt that same fear clawing at him now. His instincts screamed at him to run, to escape the chilling atmosphere that enveloped him. Yet he felt rooted to the spot, as if the very air around him had thickened, binding him in place. It was as if the lobby itself was watching, a silent witness to this grotesque game between predator and prey. "Do you want to play hide and seek with me?" she continued, her voice sweetly insistent, but there was an edge to it that made his skin crawl. "I promise I won't hurt you if you play nice." The absurdity of her words struck him like a slap. How could she say such things with that innocent smile, knowing full well the context of their surroundings? "You don't understand," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't a game, it's dangerous here." "Oh, but it's so much fun," she giggled, clapping her hands together, the sound echoing eerily in the silence. "Everyone else is gone, but you're still here. You can stay with me forever if you want. I've been waiting for you." A sickening realization washed over him. The notion that she had been waiting suggested a predatory patience, an unsettling understanding of her place in this twisted reality. It was as if she thrived on the fear she instilled, relishing the control she held over him. Suddenly a rustle echoed from a nearby corner, snapping him back to the present. His heart leaped as he turned, instinctively preparing to defend himself. The brick zombie could return at any moment. The little girl merely giggled again, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mirth and something darker as she watched him. "Don't worry about that," she said, her voice suddenly serious, cutting through the tension like a knife. "They can't hurt you if you're with me. I can keep you safe." The proposition hung in the air, heavy with implications. Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone in this nightmarish world? As he weighed his options, the reality of his situation loomed large. The lobby was a battleground, filled with the remnants of death and decay, and here stood a child who had somehow survived, transformed by the horrors around her. The little girl took a step closer, the fabric of her yellow coat brushing against the debris scattered on the floor. "So what will it be, mister? Will you play with me?" It was a decision that could mean the difference between life and death, a choice that carried the weight of his very soul. The atmosphere thickened, the tension palpable, and the room felt alive with the anticipation of what would come next. The protagonist knew he had to act, but the question remained, in a world turned upside down, could he afford to trust a little girl in a yellow coat, or would that trust seal his fate in darkness? The protagonist stared at the little girl in the yellow coat, disbelief and fear swirling within him. "What if I say no?" he asked, his voice steady despite the dread bubbling beneath the surface. The girl's smile faltered for a split second, replaced by a shadow that flickered across her innocent features. "That would make me very sad," she replied sweetly, but the undertone of menace beneath her words was unmistakable. "But if you don't want to play, I would have to kill you right where you stand." A chill ran down his spine at her casual proclamation of violence, but the reality of his situation pressed in on him. The urgency of survival suffocated his instincts, and he found himself nodding reluctantly. "Okay," he said, "I'll play with you. We'll play hide and seek." Instantly, her expression transformed. The little girl's bright smile returned, illuminating her face with a joyful innocence that only amplified his unease. "Yay, you said yes," she squealed, her laughter ringing in the air like a haunting melody. "Let's take this to the 10th floor," she declared, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I'll close my eyes and count to 1,000. If you can make it to the first floor and out that door before I finish counting, you win. And every monster you kill adds 50 points to my clock." Before he could process the implications of her words, a sudden rush of smoke enveloped him. It was thick and suffocating, swirling around him like a living entity. He gasped, feeling disoriented, and just as abruptly as it had begun, the smoke dissipated, revealing an entirely different place. He blinked, trying to regain his bearings, and as the haze cleared, he found himself standing in a dimly lit corridor on what the girl claimed was the 10th floor. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The lobby he had just been in felt like a distant memory, swallowed by the surreal shift in reality. "Here we are, the 10th floor," she chirped, her voice bright and cheerful as she twirled around, her yellow coat swirling around her like a beacon of innocence in a sea of darkness. But as the excitement radiated from her, dread settled in his stomach. "Wait," he stammered, panic rising in his throat. "If I'm on the 10th floor and I have to make my way down, wouldn't I be killed by other monsters on my way to the 1st floor?" His voice trembled as he spoke, the fear of the unknown tightening its grip on him. The little girl halted her frolicking, turning to face him with that disarming smile. "Not if you kill them first," she replied with an enthusiasm that sent a chill through him. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of delight and something darker, as if she relished the thought of the violence that lay ahead. "Kill them," he echoed, his mind racing. "You mean I have to fight my way down?" "Of course," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "It's a game after all. The more monsters you kill, the more points I get, and if you win, you get to escape. Isn't that exciting?" The juxtaposition of her innocent demeanor against the horrific stakes of their game was jarring. He felt the weight of her words pressing down on him, the absurdity of the situation crashing over him like a wave. The idea of facing the monsters that infested the building terrified him, yet the thought of defying her and facing her wrath was equally horrifying. Okay, he conceded, steeling himself against the rising tide of fear. "I'll try, but what happens if I don't make it to the 1st floor?" Her smile widened, an unsettling mix of joy and malice dancing in her eyes. "Then I guess you'll just have to find out," she chirped, her laughter echoing through the corridor like a haunting lullaby. With that, she turned away, closing her eyes and starting to count. 1, 2, 3. As she counted, he felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. An impossible choice lay before him. He glanced down the dimly lit corridor, shadows flickering at the edges of his vision, hinting at the monsters lurking just out of sight. He had no choice but to plunge into the darkness, armed only with the hope of survival and the twisted promise of escape. As he prepared to move, the gravity of the situation sank in. This was no ordinary game. The stakes were life and death, and every step he took would lead him deeper into a world where innocence had been twisted into something malevolent. The countdown echoed in his ears, and he knew it was time to face the horrors that awaited him on the way down. As the protagonist braced himself to leave the room, determination surging through him, the little girl in the yellow coat suddenly stopped him, her expression shifting once again. "Wait," she exclaimed, her voice bright yet tinged with urgency. "I misspoke earlier. What I meant to say is that I will count down from 1,000, and for every monster you kill, you'll add 50 numbers to my countdown clock. So it's possible for you to leave through the front door while I'm still counting." His heart raced at the revelation, the implication swirling in his mind. The idea of altering her countdown felt like a glimmer of hope in the otherwise dire situation, but it also introduced a new layer of complexity. "Wait, what do you mean by that?" he asked, confusion etched across his face. Before he could process her words, she dropped another bombshell. "Oh, and whenever you kill the monsters, you have to eat the core." The term struck him like a hammer, shocking him into silence. "Eat the core? What's that?" he stammered, the very thought making his stomach churn with unease. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she explained, "Whenever you defeat a monster, you have to whip its body apart or dig into its stomach. You'll find what you're looking for. It's sort of like a crystal." He felt a wave of nausea wash over him at the imagery she conjured, recalling the gruesome encounter he had witnessed with the brick zombie. The thought of tearing apart a creature and consuming its insides was almost too much to bear. What kind of world was this? A sense of dread pooled in his stomach. "Why would I want to do that?" he questioned, his voice trembling. "It will unlock your system," she declared, her enthusiasm unwavering. "It will make you stronger. You can fight better, and you'll need to be strong if you want to survive down there." The notion that he had to consume something so grotesque to gain strength left him reeling. He felt lost, grappling with the obscurity of her words and the horrifying reality that lay ahead. "Wait, what do you mean by unlock your system?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. He felt as if he were standing on the precipice of madness, caught between the chilling demands of a little girl and the grim reality of the monsters he would have to face. "And one more thing," she added, still brimming with energy. "I'll heal all of your wounds." Before he could react, she stepped forward, her small hands glowing with an otherworldly green light. The glow radiated warmth, enveloping him in a comforting aura that seemed to wash away the fatigue and pain that had settled in his body from the encounters he had endured. He felt a soothing sensation as her hands hovered above his wounds, the green light pulsing softly as it flowed into him. "There, you are all set, you're healed up and ready to fight," she announced proudly, stepping back to admire her handiwork. A mix of gratitude and confusion surged within him. "Thank you," he breathed, feeling the effects of her healing wash over him. But before he could process the gravity of his situation further, she began counting, her voice ringing clear and bright in the dim corridor. "I'm going to count now. 100, 999. With each number she recited, he felt the urgency of the moment pressing down on him. The fear of failure clawed at his insides. He knew he had to act quickly. As she continued her countdown, he dashed out of the room, propelled by adrenaline and a desperate need for survival. The corridor stretched before him, dimly lit and filled with shadows, a labyrinth of uncertainty. He could hear her counting behind him, each number echoing in his ears, urging him forward. 998, 997. He sprinted down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing against the walls, heart pounding in rhythm with the countdown. The thought of the monsters lurking in the darkness filled him with dread, but the prospect of escape, of potentially winning this twisted game, pushed him onward. As he raced through the unfamiliar territory, he felt the weight of her words pressing on him. He would have to confront the horrors that lay ahead, tear apart the creatures that haunted this building, and consume their cores to gain the strength he desperately needed. The stakes were impossibly high, and the countdown continued to tick away behind him, propelling him forward into a nightmare that had only just begun. As the protagonist cautiously stepped down the narrow corridor, the sense of dread that had been building within him melded with an odd curiosity, drawing him closer to the distant sounds of grunts and the rhythmic thuds of something heavy hitting the floor. With every step, the noise grew louder, compelling him to push open the door at the end of the hall. What awaited him inside was a bizarre and unsettling sight. A zombie was on the floor, engaged in an intense series of push-ups. The scene was both surreal and grotesque, the creature's decaying body moving with an unexpected vigor. But as soon as the door creaked open, the zombie's head snapped up, its lifeless eyes locking onto the protagonist. In an instant, the workout ceased. "New meat," the zombie growled, its voice a low, guttural rasp that sent shivers down the protagonist's spine. Without a moment's hesitation, it lunged for a set of weights nearby, grabbing them with surprising speed and throwing them at the intruder. Panic surged through him as he instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly evading the first weight, but the zombie was relentless, hurling weights in rapid succession. Each crash against the wall behind him only fueled his adrenaline, pushing him to run further into the room. He raised his arms defensively, knowing that a confrontation was inevitable. The zombie charged, its fist swinging towards him with alarming ferocity. The protagonist countered, throwing a punch of his own, and soon they were locked in a brutal exchange of blows. The stench of decay hung heavy in the air as they fought, each punch landing with a sickening thud. The zombies' growls mixed with the sounds of their struggle, but all the protagonist could hear was a cacophony of primal sounds. No coherent words, just the raw essence of a creature driven by instinct. Minutes passed and fatigue began to weigh heavily on him. He felt battered and bloodied, each hit taking its toll as he fought against this unrelenting foe. Just when he thought he might gain the upper hand, the zombie jumped back with surprising agility, a glint of brass knuckles appearing on its skeletal hands as if summoned from the void. The sight sent a chill down the protagonist's spine, a clear indication that he was in over his head. "Great, just what I needed," he huffed, frustration boiling within him. The zombie seemed to mock him, the twisted grin on its face only adding to his anger and anxiety. Without weapons, he felt utterly defenseless against this grotesque mockery of strength. But then in the chaos of battle, a flicker of inspiration struck him. He glanced around the room and noticed the weights scattered about. He quickly grabbed a pair of 5-pound dumbbells, feeling their cold metal in his hands. "If I'm going to take this thing down, I'll have to use whatever I can," he muttered under his breath. He steadied himself, gripping the weights tightly, and charged at the zombie once more. Their fight resumed with renewed intensity. With each swing of the dumbbells, he managed to land blows on the zombie, but it retaliated with its own fierce punches, blood and pain mingling in the air as they exchanged strikes. Despite the odds, he pressed on, determination fueling his every move. After what felt like an eternity of nonstop fighting, he finally saw an opening. He swung the weights with all his strength, landing a decisive blow that sent the zombie staggering backward. It crashed into the wall and crumpled to the floor, defeated. Panting heavily, the protagonist stared down at the lifeless body of the zombie, a mix of relief and exhaustion flooding through him. But he knew he couldn't stop yet. He had to find out what lay within this creature. With resolve, he knelt beside the defeated zombie and began to probe its stomach, the coldness of the decayed flesh sending a shiver down his spine. Digging in, he felt something solid and pulled out a vibrant green crystal, its surface shimmering in the dim light. As he held the crystal in his hands, a voice echoed in his mind, startling him. "Unlock your system," it commanded, reverberating through his thoughts. He froze, fear creeping in as he grasped the reality of the situation. Where was this voice coming from? Who was speaking to him? "Unlock your system," the voice repeated, more insistent this time, igniting a spark of recognition. He remembered the little girl's words about the crystals and how they could empower him. Gathering his courage, he brought the crystal to his lips, biting into it before swallowing. The moment he did, the voice returned, clearer than ever. "You have finally unlocked your system." A surge of energy coursed through him, electrifying his senses. He felt a rush of power, as if the very essence of the crystal was melding with his being. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. The world around him began to shift, colors brightening and sounds sharpening, and he realized that he had tapped into something profound. The fight against the zombie had been brutal, but it had led him to this moment of transformation. He was no longer just a survivor. He was evolving, unlocking potential he had never known he possessed. With renewed strength and purpose coursing through his veins, he stood up, ready to face whatever awaited him next in this twisted, nightmarish world. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the content and want to keep the good vibes rolling, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you want more awesome videos like this. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and join our amazing community. Just tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for your support, and let's keep this journey going together.